Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Clara always believed she knew every gesture, every expression, and every silence of Daniel. Their marriage had been built on a solid foundation of trust and closeness. She took pride in saying her husband was an honest man, someone who always made her feel safe. That's why, when she heard Vanessa's comment during a work break, it felt like the ground gave way beneath her. Her coworker spoke casually, almost indifferent, like she was mentioning something unimportant. But the sentence stuck in Clara's mind: "I'm almost certain I saw your husband entering a hotel in Carlton with a woman." She laughed it off right away, trying to shut down the conversation like it was just some random mix-up. Carlton wasn't even a place they ever visited. But as the hours passed, that remark kept echoing in her head, an uncomfortable loop. Vanessa wasn't known for making things up, and the certainty in her voice was hard to ignore. Clara found herself wondering if Daniel had said anything about Carlton. Nothing. All he mentioned was that he'd be out fishing with friends over the weekend. When Daniel came back from that trip, he seemed like his usual self. He hugged her, told stories about fishing, but there was something subtly different. He didn't bring any fish. To anyone else, that might have gone unnoticed, but for Clara, it was impossible to miss. Daniel always came back with at least one catch to show the family or the neighbors. It was almost a ritual, part of his tradition as an experienced angler. This time, nothing. He just said fishing hadn't been productive. Clara tried to push the bad thoughts aside. Maybe luck just wasn't on his side that weekend. Maybe it was just a coincidence that Vanessa had seen someone who looked like Daniel in Carlton. Still, the memory of that conversation kept coming back in the days that followed. She caught herself looking at her husband differently, searching for signs that could either confirm or dismiss her unease. She noticed pauses in conversations, answers that were too quick, glances that shifted away whenever she brought up fishing. What bothered her most was the lack of new details in his story. Daniel usually told his fishing adventures with enthusiasm, describing failed attempts, the bait he used, even the color of the water. But this time, he seemed eager to drop the subject. It was like he wanted to avoid her asking questions. That doubt started creeping into the simplest moments. A dinner together didn't taste the same anymore, casual conversations felt loaded with hidden meanings. Clara found herself analyzing gestures and words, searching for clues that would confirm or deny the image Vanessa had described. The harder she tried to act like nothing had changed, the more she realized something inside her already had. She didn't know if she wanted the truth or if she'd rather keep believing in the peaceful version of her life. But deep down, something told her she was only scratching the surface of something much bigger. On Monday, Clara decided she needed answers. She wasn't looking for a fight or a dramatic scene, she wanted facts. Before heading to work, she started with what was always within reach, the household routine. She opened the laundry basket and sorted Daniel's clothes. She folded shirts, checked pockets out of habit, pulled out an old movie ticket he'd kept months ago, a crumpled gas receipt, loose change. All normal. Until she got to his fishing jacket. The piece carried memories of quiet weekends, laughs with friends, photos he liked to show off. Clara laid the jacket flat on the table, ran her hand along the lining, and felt a small lump in the inner pocket. She reached in and pulled out a matchbook. The hotel's name was printed in small letters, Carlton. The cover was intact, with 2 sticks missing inside. Clara stared at it for a few seconds, like someone trying to understand a sentence in a foreign language and slowly grasping its meaning. Carlton. The same town Vanessa had mentioned. A town Clara and Daniel had never stayed in. The object felt heavy in her hand, like a verdict before the trial. She gripped it tightly, closed her eyes briefly, and felt the warm sting of suspicion sharpen into something colder. She put the matchbook in a kitchen drawer, locked it, and kept the key. She wanted to preserve the evidence, but she also needed to sort through the chaos in her head. She went back to the closet. She checked the jacket again, turned the pockets inside out, found a piece of tissue paper with a faint tobacco smell, probably from a smoking friend. Found a loose hook and a knot of fishing line Daniel always left there for luck. Nothing else. The matchbook remained the only clear sign that something was off. Then Clara started a system. She grabbed an old notebook and opened a fresh page. She wrote Friday at the top and listed what she remembered from the day Daniel left: departure before dawn, cooler, fishing rods in the trunk, a quick kiss, and a message from him midday saying, bad signal, back Sunday. On the next page, she wrote Saturday and noted the silence from his phone, then on Sunday, the message, getting back late, tired. Next to it, in smaller letters, she scribbled, no fish. She needed to see everything outside her head, in order, like the story was laid out on a table. She decided to check the bank. She opened the app and looked for weekend expenses. Gas stations, grocery stores, tolls. Nothing about a hotel. That didn't help at all. Daniel usually paid in cash when he went out with friends, and the lack of records just left room for guesses. She closed the app and took a breath. At this point, any impulsive move could trap her. She sent a message to Tyler, one of Daniel's fishing buddies. How was the fishing? Simple question, no edge. Tyler replied within minutes, good for me and Nate. The lake was calm. Everything good over there? Clara stayed casual. That's great. Daniel said he didn't catch much. Tyler sent a laughing emoji. He spent half the afternoon fixing a fuse box on the boat. Lucky Nate brought extra gear. Clara thanked him, put her phone away, and wrote that down in the notebook. If Daniel spent part of the day fixing equipment, that explained the empty return. It explained it, but didn't erase the matchbook. That afternoon, while organizing the pantry, her mind took a dangerous turn. What if the matchbook had a simple explanation? A freebie from some random restaurant? Could someone have left it in the jacket? She'd already found strange things in bags by accident before. That line of thinking gave her a second of relief, then instantly turned back into suspicion. Because the name printed on it was exactly the name Vanessa said when she claimed to have seen Daniel. Too much of a coincidence to just ignore. Clara decided to test something. That evening, while making dinner, she brought up short trips. She mentioned a coworker who passed through Carlton to visit an aunt. She asked Daniel, with practiced casualness, if he'd ever been there. He said yes, just passing through on old road trips with friends, and asked why she was curious. Clara shrugged, said the coworker recommended a restaurant and it might be a good stop on a future drive. He changed the subject and asked about her work. Clara followed along, but wrote in the notebook, admitted he's been through Carlton, avoided details. There was a moment when Clara's mind tried to save the marriage with logical accounting, adding up accounts, subtracting uncertainties, multiplying chances of innocence. She remembered birthdays when Daniel planned simple surprises, lazy Sundays on the couch, how worried he was when she had a fever last winter. Those memories stepped in like defense lawyers. But the matchbook silenced each argument. She needed something more concrete. The next day at work, Clara got a coffee and looked for Vanessa. She asked again, carefully, how that sighting in Carlton had happened. Vanessa described it: a hotel entrance, a tall man with stubble, a dark cap, with a woman with brown hair. She said he looked like her husband, but from a distance. Looked like is a word that swallows certainty and leaves room for everything. Still, Vanessa's voice didn't sound careless. It seemed like she really had seen something that struck her. Clara decided to build an alternate timeline, a kind of parallel story. What if Daniel really had been in Carlton on Saturday afternoon? In what window could that have happened, considering his messages and Tyler's account about the boat's fuse box? She scribbled times, drew arrows, circled gaps. And there, between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. on Saturday, she found a possible gap. A stretch with no messages, no fishing photos, no calls. That discovery sparked something. She opened her browser and searched "hotel in Carlton." She found pictures of the lobby, the address, the approximate distance from the lake where his friends usually fished. She calculated the round trip in her head. It was doable. She pressed her lips, closed the tab, and pushed the laptop away. More than doable, it was plausible. Her mind took a step forward and ran into caution. Any rushed accusation could turn doubt into ruin. She tucked her impatience in her pocket along with her pen. That night, when Daniel came home, Clara noticed small details she'd never paid attention to before. Now they seemed like signs: the way he left his keys on the table, the rush to shower before dinner, a quick glance at his phone when a notification popped up. Ordinary things that, under the weight of one clue, took on the shape of evidence. She caught herself thinking about how the mind is good at building stories from loose pieces. Still, there was one solid piece: the matchbook in the locked drawer. Distracted, she bumped her elbow on the notebook and the pen left a crooked mark on the page. She laughed quietly at her own clumsiness. She reread her notes: Friday's message, Saturday's silence, Sunday's tired return, Tyler's account, the vague admission about passing through Carlton, on an old road. It all fit the theory of coincidence, but it also fit a story of secrecy. And that's when the mind picks a side. Clara realized she'd already picked hers. The matchbook had acted like a stamp on wet paper. It fixed an idea that now guided every move. She lay down and stared at the ceiling, thinking about how life can change because of one tiny detail. For years, just hearing Daniel's car engine was enough to bring her peace. Now, the same sound brought questions. Her mind formed a simple plan for the next day: confirm times with another fishing buddy, check card transactions again, go through her memory for any past mention of Carlton. Every step would be calculated. No accusations, no scenes. Clara was about to turn a suspicion into a mission. And at the center of that mission, a matchbook waited silently, like it knew its own power. Clara spent the following days with the same thought on repeat: if Daniel had crossed a line, she wouldn't stay quiet. The matchbook at the bottom of the drawer seemed to pulse, reminding her of every faster heartbeat. The idea of confronting him directly floated in her mind, but she knew that if he denied it, she'd have no way out. She needed something that would make him feel the same weight she was carrying. That's when the idea of using Julian started to take shape. Julian was new at the company, still trying to adjust to the work pace and the group. He was quiet, but stood out because of his looks and a certain shyness that contrasted with the others. Clara had never really looked at him with interest before. But as her anger at Daniel mixed with frustration, she began to see the guy as an opportunity. If Daniel had chosen to act behind her back, or at least that's how it seemed, then she'd do the same. And she'd do it in a way that would hurt. At first, her moves were subtle. More relaxed comments during conversations, lingering looks, smiles that lasted just a bit longer than needed. Julian responded politely, usually looking away, like he didn't know how to handle the attention. That hesitation, for Clara, only reinforced the idea that he wasn't used to this kind of advance, which made it easier to shape the situation to her liking. As the days passed, she started intensifying the game. She picked clothes that showed off her figure, leaned in close to speak in his ear when she needed to say something, lightly touched his arm in calculated gestures. She watched his reactions and saw discomfort turn into a mix of curiosity and poorly hidden desire. Julian seemed torn between fear and the urge to go along. Vanessa noticed. One afternoon, while they had coffee, she looked at Clara and said straight out, "Are you sure you want to go through with this? He has nothing to do with what you think Daniel did. You could end up hurting someone who doesn't deserve it." Clara thanked her for the concern but dismissed the advice. In her mind, Julian wasn't just an innocent guy. At that moment, he was a tool to hit back at her husband. A symbol of retaliation. The following week, Clara waited for the right moment to move forward. During lunch break, she approached Julian and mentioned there was a company party, something casual, and he should come to fit in. She used a casual tone, but her look made it clear there was a second intention. Julian hesitated, saying he wasn't really in the mood, but she insisted with a persuasive smile. In the end, he agreed. Clara knew it was risky. She knew that if Daniel found out, their marriage could fall apart. But at that moment, the pain of his possible betrayal felt bigger than the fear of consequences. What she wanted wasn't just revenge, it was proof to herself that she still had power, that she could still choose. When the day came, Clara got ready carefully. She wanted every detail to be planned for seduction. She called Julian before leaving and said she'd pick him up, saying they'd arrive together so he wouldn't feel out of place. On the way, she avoided talking about work or anything light. She let silence build tension. Instead of going to the address she'd mentioned, Clara parked in front of a small, discreet hotel, the kind of place that would go unnoticed if you weren't paying attention. Julian was confused, asking about the party. Clara smiled slightly and said she'd changed her mind. She moved closer, touched his face, and made it clear that this was the real reason she'd invited him. He hesitated, but didn't pull away. There was surprise in his eyes, but also a flicker of restrained desire. Clara felt he understood what was happening, and that, despite his uncertainty, he'd chosen to go along. As it unfolded, she expected to feel the relief she'd imagined for days. She thought that by giving in to that impulse, part of the pain she carried would disappear. But as the encounter went on, she realized the scene was nothing like the one she'd built in her head. Julian seemed insecure, passive, lost between hesitant moves and failed attempts to appear confident. What was supposed to be a night of affirmation turned into something mechanical, emotionless, like they were following a script neither truly wanted. Midway through the embrace, a thought shot through her mind like lightning: what if he didn't do anything? What if it was all just a misunderstanding? Her body hesitated. A knot formed in her throat. But she kept going, trapped in the idea that even if she was wrong, there was no turning back. The act had to happen, like a sentence she'd already passed on herself. When she got home that night, Clara still carried the tension of the encounter in her body and an unexplainable weight in her mind. She expected the house to be quiet, but Daniel was in the living room, sitting, staring blankly at the wall. There was no anger on his face, just a coldness that cut deeper than any shout. Clara tried to act like everything was the same as that morning, but his posture was firm, unshakable. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, calmly, he asked, "Where were you?" Before she could answer, he went on. "A friend of mine, Mark, saw you entering a hotel with a man. He recognized your car, wrote down part of the plate. Said he didn't need anything else to understand the situation. And neither do I." Clara felt the floor drop. She tried to speak, but he cut her off. "You can explain. But you don't have to. I've already decided." That's when she lost control. Anger rose, mixed with desperation, and she fired the accusation she'd been holding for days. She talked about Vanessa seeing him with another woman, mentioned the matchbook found in the jacket, and used every detail like it was definitive proof. She spoke fast, without measuring tone or weight, as if she could flip the game and put him on the defensive. Daniel listened to the end without interrupting, then said firmly, "Vanessa from your office? She doesn't even know me. How can she say she saw me in a hotel with another woman? Give me her number right now." With no way out, Clara handed it over. He made a video call in front of her, speaker on. When Vanessa answered and saw Daniel on screen, she was surprised and quickly admitted she'd been mistaken. She explained that when she saw Daniel, she realized she'd never seen him before, and the man at the hotel just looked a lot like her ex-husband. The coincidence in appearance and situation made her jump to a wrong conclusion, and she apologized for the misunderstanding. Clara felt her face burn. She tried to insist on the matchbook as evidence, but Daniel spoke first. He said the jacket had been lent to his friend Nate, the same one who brought the extra gear, while he fixed the boat. Nate wore the jacket while they fished, and he must have stayed in Carlton at some point, and the matchbook was his, probably left in the pocket. Daniel told it all in a neutral voice, like he was reporting something unimportant. With each of Daniel's words, Clara realized the foundation of her suspicions was collapsing. What once seemed solid now sounded fragile, held up only by rushed interpretations and coincidences. The space between them grew heavy, not from fighting, but from his complete lack of willingness to fix things. Daniel didn't ask for justification about Julian, didn't ask for details, didn't show curiosity. He just confirmed he'd seen enough to understand who she was at that moment, and that was enough to end the relationship. Clara tried to argue, but her words came out scattered. Daniel gathered a few personal items and said he'd rather sleep somewhere else that night. As he closed the door behind him, he left her with a silence that screamed louder than any fight they could have had. That silence carried the message that nothing said from that point on would change what was already decided. Clara stood there, feeling blood rush to her face. The sentence he'd just said echoed in her head. "So explain to me, Clara, how could you have the courage to accuse me of being in a hotel with another woman when your own source just admitted she'd never seen me before?" He didn't need to raise his voice for the weight of the question to cut through the air. She tried to find in his eyes some sign of openness, but found nothing but a solid wall, like one had just been built between them. It felt like the conversation had no purpose anymore, because Daniel had already decided the outcome. Clara thought about justifying her reaction, bringing up the matchbook, emphasizing how everything seemed to fit, but she realized nothing would sound convincing after that revelation. Then Daniel said that, for him, the marriage was over right there. He didn't ask for explanations about Julian, didn't want details. He said that even if he'd acted on impulse too, he didn't make decisions based on assumptions. And faced with what he'd discovered, a wife who accused him without proof and then betrayed him based on that same suspicion, there was no trust left to rebuild. His words were direct, without dramatic pauses, like he'd spent days rehearsing that moment. Clara tried to move closer, saying it had all been an impulse, that she was hurt and let herself be carried away by what she believed was true. He just grabbed his keys and started packing a few things. He put away documents, took some clothes from the closet, and stuffed them in a backpack. He didn't say goodbye with a hug or any gesture of affection, just said he'd spend the night elsewhere. With the house empty, silence filled every corner. It wasn't just his physical absence, but the certainty that nothing would ever go back to how it was. What started with a suspicion, fed by coincidences and interpretations, had turned into a reckless action that, in just a few days, completely dismantled the life she knew. As she looked at the drawer where the matchbook still sat, the question echoing in her mind wasn't about where Daniel had been, but about who she herself had become, and whether there was still a way back. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.